I spend a lot of time and I'm known for helping people financially optimize their portfolio. And I see the number one mistake in many people's portfolio is their rental property is under rented. But Keyrenter, they are the specialists when it comes into looking at how can we not just make sure your rent is optimized, but also a bunch of other stuff in terms of optimizing your expenses, optimizing other sources of income to increase NOI and decrease vacancy. Good afternoon, everyone. Chris Lopez here, and I want to welcome you to our call. We're going to talk about how to do a portfolio health audit for your rental properties. Before we get into it, let me know in the chat what part of Colorado you're in. Denver, the suburbs. I also make sure you guys can hear us. So drop something in the chat so I know you can hear us out there. And also let us know what part of town you're in, please. All right. We got someone from the foothills coming in here as well. So fantastic.
Right. Welcome.
Great. Lots of Denver people can hear us. Great. Well, we can officially kick off the webinar, everyone. Again, my name is Chris Lopez, and today's webinar is one I'm co-hosting with Keyrenter Denver Property Management. So, I spend a lot of time and I'm known for helping people financially optimize their portfolio. And I see the number one mistake in many people's portfolio is their rental property is under rented. I don't talk about that because I'm more focused on your ROE, but Keyrenter, they are the specialists when it comes into looking at how can we not just make sure your rent is optimized, but also a bunch of other stuff in terms of optimizing your expenses, optimizing other sources of income to increase NOI and decrease vacancy. So today's webinar, we're going to go through a couple of case studies and actually talk about what their portfolio health audit is. But I'm joined by Brandon, who is the owner at Keyrenter. Good afternoon, Brandon.
Good afternoon. Glad to be
And
here.
John with Keyrenter, who helps with all the client onboarding and helps clients optimize their portfolio.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, John.
Good afternoon, Chris. Thanks for having me.
So always have to give you guys a standard legal disclaimer here. We're not attorneys reviewing your lease. We're not your financial advisor. We are sharing data that we know as fellow investors and also respective real estate professionals. But always go out there and make sure you talk with your team before you go out there and make any decisions, and talk with your professional team as well. All right, gentlemen. John, what are we talking about today?
So essentially what you said, we're talking about portfolio health audit. So essentially what we will cover, rental rates. We're going to cover operating costs, Denver rental license and compliance with that if you are in the city and county of Denver, and some other performance factors that we'll dive into as well. So essentially the goal is to provide you with opportunities to improve efficiency and boost profitability on your portfolio.
Cool. And one thing that we will not cover today is we will not be giving legal advice or reviewing leases, as we've talked about. But this was, I think, end of last year. Brandon, you and I started chatting. Then we quickly got John looped in the conversation because, Brandon and I talk a lot, and he has such interesting data for managing, over 1,000 doors around Denver. He sees trends, he sees patterns, and, I ask him questions and learn a lot of stuff. And then we were talking about how can people go out there and optimize their portfolio. And John quickly came back to, I've got like 3 pages of what I take people through, and we go through this. And this is the audit. So walk us through the process and kind of like the main points you go out there to review an investor's portfolio and how you actually go through and audit it and optimize it.
Okay, sure. So yeah, it starts with initial phone consultation. So we'll just have a quick phone call. I'll gather some information. Depending on how many properties you have, we'll get the property addresses dialed in, beds, baths, square footage, that sort of thing, lease agreements, current utility bills, what you're charging the tenants, or maybe not charging the tenants, and property listing details as well. So we can dive into, looking at your photos, looking at your listing, how you're marketing it. And of course, we're looking at what you're charging the tenants in rent as well. Then once I have that information, I'll go back to my desk and start putting together a rental assessment. Compare that with what you're getting for rent right now. Look at the Denver rental license. If you are in the city and county of Denver, have you done that? If so, great. If not, we'll help you get through that and basically be compliant. Look at utilities, again, like I said, if you're charging tenants for utilities, great. If not, we'll dive into, why you're not doing that. Sometimes it makes sense to not charge utilities, but most of the time it does.
But a lot of people usually are leaving revenue off the table or on the table when they're not doing some type of utility bill back, right?
Yeah, you could be. But like one instance is like water. If you've got a lawn and tenants are responsible for watering the lawn, but they have to pay for water as well. Well, maybe they won't water the lawn so they can save money on water, and they don't have to then take care of the lawn, but then the lawn dies, and that's then something we have to deal with the owners, because that's not a good thing.
And it's expensive to regrow a lawn.
Correct. Yeah. So there's some strategies there that we can get into later if we get that far, but that's definitely something I would talk to owners about for sure. And then we dive into the property listing review. And one thing that I would really like to stress is photos. Spend a couple $100 on photos and really just get them professionally done, because that just goes such a long way. And then once I'm done with that, I will reach out and we'll do a Zoom meeting and we'll go through my findings, and then kind of go from there. And hopefully we've helped uncover some aspects that would increase your revenue.
Great. And there is a QR code there, and we'll drop the link in the chat and send out an email, but that will go to John's calendar link. So you go on there and book a 30-minute call to start that initial consultation in step one, and then start going through the process. And if you are interested in here, I'd recommend you book it sooner rather than later. We were talking before the webinar, you can do about 10 or 12 of these a month, because, hey, this does take you a couple hours to do the audit for people, and you do first come, first serve. So if you're interested in one, go and book it sooner rather than later, just so you're farther up in the line. Otherwise, it might be a couple weeks before John can sit down and get with you. I do have a question on here. Rental market assessment. So like I said, when I do my portfolio reviews with people, the biggest, I don't want to say mistake, but the biggest issue I see a lot of times is like, hey, a 3-2 house in this part of town, here's what rent's for, right? You kind of know these rules of thumb. I'm like, wow, you are $500, $600 under market rent. It's like the number one issue I see from landlords. Is that something you guys see on your side as a PM company?
We definitely will see that. Yeah, for sure. And sometimes it's the opposite, where they're looking to get more rent than what the market is willing to bear. So, like we talked about before this, somebody's got a mortgage of $3,000 and that's what they want at least, but the market's showing $2,500. That's some of the hardest conversations we can have, because they're just set on that number, and where do you go from there? So we just want people to be set up realistically. When we do market analysis and rent, we give them a range, right? Because we want to set up expectations. So we'll give them a range, anywhere from like, let's say 2,500 to 3,000, and then say you probably want to be in the middle. Best case scenario is be at or just below market rent. That way you're going to be able to rent your home quick. You're going to get great tenants, and probably going to renew at the end of the year. So.
Cool. I've definitely found sometimes you can set a price that's above market, and you may be able to get a tenant one time or something, but it's often because that tenant's kind of desperate. You can't even always identify it on the front end of why, but you will pay for it in one way or another on the back end. Either they get, there's the guy who was here for one day and he's moving from out of town and just had to pick something, or whatever it might be. But they're going to get in, realize they're over market. That's going to be a tough situation to navigate. They're going to expect you to fix everything immediately and be a demanding tenant. They're not going to renew their lease. So hitting market is really important there, and you don't really do yourself any favors to turn the property over once a year and all the expenses that go along with that. So important thing to stay zeroed in on.
No, that's great. And a quick reminder that calendar link is in there, and I forgot to say this is a free audit that Keyrenter is doing. And they're doing it to go out there, obviously build relationships, and they want new clients to manage. So whether you're looking for a new PM now, or you just want some value, and then great, maybe in a year or two, you're tired of managing the properties, definitely reach out to John. But it's a free audit, which I am very much appreciative of. Yeah.
I mean, we're here to help people, whether you're self-managing or using us as a property manager. It really doesn't matter to us. We just want to kind of elevate everybody's game.
So why does all this matter, John?
Oh, well, we've got a couple reasons. So one of them is making sure that you are financially set. So if you want to click to the next slide, we can kind of go into that. Reason one, maximize your rental income. So the right pricing strategy, it's going to reduce vacancies. It's going to attract quality tenants, like Brandon had mentioned, and keep your property profitable. So we talked about the market research, comparable analysis. That's one strategy and way to maximize rental income. Looking at comparable rentals in your area. So what we do when we're doing a rental analysis, we'll look at it from a few different angles. We'll look at Zillow and what's in your area, what's it renting for right now, what's on the market, how long it's been on the market, were there any price drops, that sort of thing. That gives us an idea of where the market's at. Then we'll run a rental analysis, and I put a few rental analysis tools, Rentometer, Rent Range, and Rent Finder AI, which I really like a lot. Rent Finder AI, that is. And we'll go in there and pull the rental analysis. So with those two aspects, then we can really dive in and give you that rental, that rent range that I was talking about. So that helps you figure out roughly where the market is. And then, of course, seasonal adjustments. Everybody knows that summer is the best time to rent. So you can potentially get a little bit more rent during those prime season or that prime time, that peak season. And then if one thing we're seeing a lot is right now in the winter time or when there's a lot of supply, incentives for the tenants, so if you've got, look, we were talking about watering, maybe you want to separate yourself from your neighbor who has a similar home for rent, but you want somebody to rent your place instead of theirs, maybe provide some incentives during those times where it's slower.
Yep. And also I see a lot of this where, hey, ideally, we're all renting during prime time, right? Like late spring, summertime, but sometimes life doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm.
If you have to rent in Q4, which is the unideal time, do you recommend like a 6-month or 18-month lease to kind of get them back on the cycle of prime time? Because like I've been in a situation in the past where like you constantly like lease up during Q4 and it's not fun, nor is it as profitable.
Yeah, we'll definitely take that strategy if that's something that the owners want. Usually they're like, oh yeah, that's great. Maybe more of like a 12-month to an 18-month instead of a 6-month, but it just really depends.
You can kind of offer, sometimes that's just part of the negotiation with the tenant of like, we don't want a 1-year lease. We either want, shorter or longer. And yeah, you'll probably do, if it's going to be shorter, you'd want a little more, maybe a premium.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question here. What geographic areas does Keyrenter work in, and are you in Northern Colorado?
We're not in Northern Colorado. Yeah, we're kind of 470 loop is the easiest way to think about it.
Okay. So core Denver metro for Parker, Highlands Ranch, up to like north side of like Thornton, Arvada type areas.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a few in Erie and a few outliers, but mostly it's within that E470, C470 corridor. Yeah.
What about value add features?
Yeah, so value add, that's something that you could utilize if you want to increase rents. So just, some small updates, modern fixtures, fresh paint, smart home technology, things like that. The electronic keypad is always nice for tenants nowadays.
Like the door one?
Yeah.
Which one of those? I know lots of, hey, they're $100 for a keypad, $100, $200 for a smart thermostat. Like, what of those smart home features do you see like a really good ROI on? Are there like specific ones like, hey man, for $200 on here, we get such great feedback, or a lot of people want this? Are there like certain smart home stuff that really increases demand?
Well, I don't know if I really have a great answer for that, but I would say, let's say for the keypad, as far as an owner goes, if you have a keypad, let's just say, well, it's a lot easier to change the code on a keypad than to get a locksmith in to change that lock when somebody moves out. I know that for us, that's super helpful. So that's something to think about. And lockouts, if you are self-managing, you're trying to make it as kind of hands-off as possible, even though when you're self-managing, that's not as easy. But if somebody has a lockout, it's easy. You've got the code, right? You don't have to deal with lockouts really as much. So
I had a tenant bang on my door at like 11 at night one time. And my wife was like, yeah, that's not going to work for me anymore.
Yeah.
So got to figure out a way that's
They found your home address, or was it? Wow.
I had done I signed the lease with them in my house, so they knew where it was and they weren't that far away. So they came over for a key, and then when I didn't answer my phone, it was just like, oh, let's just go pound on his door.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not
That
ideal.
doesn't work. I'm going to add one thing here that soap and water is just your best friend if like when your property is vacant. I mean, when people go through, it has to look really clean, and it just goes a long way when you don't necessarily have the money to update the bathroom or whatever, but getting a property to smell clean and look really good is just the best money you can spend.
Mm-hmm. And to tie into that too, like when somebody's looking at your home, you're renting your home, you're doing tours, We'll talk with owners where it's like, oh, I don't want to do this or I don't want to fix that. And I just have to reiterate that if that's what you want to do, okay, fine, but maybe you're not a good fit for us. But at the same time, when somebody's looking at your home and they see that you're not taking care of your home, subconsciously, when they move in, they're like, well, they don't care about this, this home, so why should I really? So we really stress that to people that we talk to all the time.
I would also add on the smart home stuff. I think it's really property dependent, right? Like if you're renting a real luxury home, then those things start to just, like really mean a lot to the type of tenant that you attract there. But yeah, like on a lower end home, I think putting in a Nest thermostat or something like that is not going to be, it's probably more of a pain than anything and doesn't really add much value.
So I'm curious about like the keypad locks. Are you putting some of those on long-term rentals as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the midterms, it's required.
Probably absolutely on the midterms, right?
Yeah, absolutely. On the long terms, it's really up to the owner whether they want to do it or not.
Most of what it's a good benefit, and it just simplifies things, and over the long haul, it reduces your cost of rekeying in between tenants.
Yeah, and some of these, smart home technologies, they might not necessarily add value to your home, but when people walk in and they see it, they're like, ooh, that's nice. Yeah, I've always wanted one of those. So they'll want to rent for, potentially because of that. Cool. You never know what makes people sign on the dotted line. Could be something really silly.
And how do you do some like long-term tenant incentivizing?
So I guess for me, my wife and I, we just purchased a single family home for ourselves, and we held on to our townhome in Golden. So this one kind of struck a chord with me because when we had this couple move in from Wyoming and they never really spent much time in Colorado. So we spent 2 years living in that townhome. So we know the area and they're pretty active. They've got a dog. So we just put together like a welcome package really. So it's like a form or not a form, but just a sheet that's like, okay, here's some local hikes, here's some dog parks, here's some cool restaurants, breweries, things like that. And then we got them a gift card to a local bakery that we really like. And then our friend's little taqueria in Golden. So that was just a nice little feature, a welcome package for them. And so that's kind of what I'm talking about as far as incentivizing. This as long-term tenants, but yeah, something like if you have tenants that have been in there for a while and you really want them to stay because they're good, just be creative, I guess. If they've asked for I don't know, some small upgrade like a soft close toilet seat or something, simple like that. Just little things that might help make their stay at your home more comfortable.
I think that's even one where you can ask them like, what would, if if there's one thing you could upgrade in the home, what would it be? And if I'd really love new flooring in the bathroom or something. It might be like totally worth the goodwill that buys to spend a few $100 or whatever it might be.
That makes sense, especially now with, we talk about this, like there's just a huge uptick in retention. I think all across the board, like we're seeing, more people staying in places. I know, landlords and PMs are focusing on more retention now. Like that's a great retention point.
Yeah. Especially when if you have something that's competing with all the new construction apartments, those guys are offering a ton of incentives, like 2 months free or whatever. And so, yeah, just know that that's out there and you want to do what you can to incentivize people to stay.
How about minimizing vacancy loss? Because this is one of my pet peeves when I talk to people. I think we talked about this before. Hey, people will stick a really high written number on there, let the property be vacant for 2 months, and then, oh, cool, I got this high written number. But you have 2 months of vacancy, and that's just cool. You got $3,000, but 2 more months at $2,800 is more income to you than $3,000 with 2 months at zero. So, like, I see this as like a silly mistake landlords make.
Yeah, absolutely. So being realistic about what your home can rent for, not worrying about what your mortgage is. If your mortgage is more than what the rent is, then you need to look at other options like selling.
It could still make sense. I would just add to that. We talked a lot about trying to assess the market value by looking at comps and all that. But remember, nobody knows the rental market better than a prospective tenant. So pay attention when you actually go to market of what it's telling you, right? If nobody's scheduling showings, then it's not actually priced competitively based on what people are looking for. So I think some people can get kind of defensive or again be hung up on I have to get this number in order to justify, the paying my holding costs or whatever. But that really has nothing to do with the market. And and the market will tell you what your property's worth.
That is such great advice. All right, so protecting property value.
Yeah, so that's another reason why this is important. Protecting your property value. We kind of touched on this a little bit. Like people that don't want to maintain their home, like it's an asset. It's a lot of money for everybody that owns a home. So why wouldn't you want to protect it? So if you are getting proper rents, you're able to have strong cash flow. You can then take that money, put it into maintenance reserves. Like this first line says, allocate 5 to 10% of your rental income to maintenance reserves. Super important, because then when things do happen, which they will, you're not surprised, and it's not like, where am I going to find this money? So that's super important. I know it makes our job easier as property managers as well when people have maintenance reserves and they're ready for that and they're realistic about it. And then you can take that and put it towards upgrades, or if you once you reach that your reserve limit that you want, or put it towards future investments.
So got a question here from Peter. This is going back to the previous slide. Do you show and advertise the property before it becomes vacant? And what vacancy rate should you expect? So, hey, if a property is becoming vacant, hey, lease ends March 30th. So, hey, 2 months from now, what's the timeline for when you start the, pre-leasing or leasing activities, assuming the tenant doesn't want to renew?
Yeah. So when I started with Keyrenter about 4 years ago, we were, tenants had to give us a 60-day notice to vacate. So if they said, no, we're not going to renew, we would then start the marketing process. And the thought was, okay, we can get a jump start on that and reduce vacancy. But what we found was, you show up, tenants didn't put keys in the lockbox, so we can't access it, or we do get in, but the place is a mess, or somebody answers the door with their shirt off, so it's not very professional, that sort of thing. I could go in, there's a ton of other things, but so we didn't see it that was a huge advantage. So we've actually changed it. For the most part, we won't show a home until tenants have moved out. It's been clean. Any make-ready items have been done. That way, when prospective tenants are touring it, they're seeing it in the condition that it is going to be in when they move in. So what that's done is reduced maintenance calls when the tenants do move in, because it is the way, they're seeing it in its state.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Are you starting the marketing before then? Like, do you start the listing before?
Yeah, we start it once we kind of have a real firm date of when it's going to be fully ready.
Okay.
About a week to 10 days out, something like that. And we'll even let people start scheduling showings at that time.
So really, if you have a 7 to 10 day window before, that's probably kind of like the sweet spot for like balancing out when a new resident may move in and when another person's moving out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I would say one thing I'd just add to this too is when we did have those situations where we'd list the property, we'd get some tours scheduled, have issues with access, or we show up and there's a dog barking on the other side of the door and nobody's home, like we don't know, like I don't want to open that door, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so you'd have those issues. First of all, you pissed off a prospective tenant and all that, but also now it's like, well, okay, we got to stop showings on the property and wait until we figure this out or get the tenant to clean up a little bit or whatever it might be. Well, now, like, I swear when I first started, this wasn't a big deal, where like days on market became like this black eye on the property. But over time, and especially the last few years, we really saw that affect like the amount of interest we'd get. So when you kind of like tried and missed because of some issues like that, then all of a sudden now the property's vacant and you're just not getting any interest, and you're like lowering the price. But now it's like everybody sees that it's been on the market for 45 days and thinks it must not be any good, kind of thing. So that was part of what we were solving for there as well.
That makes sense. So you were seeing, I know for selling a property, days on market after about 3 weeks, you kind of get that stigma. Oh, no one's has interest in that property, probably not good property. You kind of saw that same
thing.
Same stigma with rental.
Makes you wonder what's wrong. Pictures look great.
That's interesting. What about preventative maintenance?
I think that's just important, whether it's your car or your home or anything, making sure that your HVAC system is working properly, anything else that could use preventative maintenance. Just staying on top of that is important. It's going to save you money in the long run.
We could put it in the notes or something, but we did do a podcast on preventative maintenance where we just walked through some of the key items to look for and things like that. And it's something that, it's reflected in the inspections we do, but for someone self-managing, and you can probably Google and find something out there, but it's amazing how far that can go of just having a basic checklist of, hey, let me just look over the property and check these few things. There's a lot of things that if you if you stay on top of it, it's not going to be a big expense at all. But let that build up over time, and you'll have mechanical failures on your systems.
Yeah. And then any items you want to talk about for protecting property value?
Let's see, what else do we have in there? I mean, addressing issues as quickly as possible. That's a huge thing. Sometimes we have owners who, they're like, can I do my own maintenance? And it's like, well, we're not necessarily going to say no, but we want to stress that, speed is important. It's like tenants, they want, if they're going to put in a work order, they expect it to be taken care of, as soon as possible. And there's actually laws that were just recently placed that do put parameters on how quick we need to reach out. But it's also, it's a big pain point for tenants. It's like, oh, we've got this water leak and nobody, the owner's not even paying attention. Like he doesn't care or she doesn't care or whatever. So that's going to send a bad message to the tenants, and they're probably not going to renew at the end. So that's, speed to the maintenance can affect whether the tenants stay.
The data shows it was like over 70% of tenants who non-renew cited maintenance response or like quality of repairs and things like that as the reason. So it was the overwhelming reason.
70%, 7-0.
Yeah.
Wow. And that's a pretty easy thing to like handle. Like that's not a property issue. It's not a location issue. That's just
just
being quick on
stuff and
communication and getting someone out there.
Correct. Yeah. So if we're working with an owner and they're dragging their feet, like that affects us as a company, right? Because then, the tenant's not going to write a bad review for the owner. They're going to write a bad review.
Oh yeah,
for
you're the guilty one.
Yeah, exactly. And we might not have had. It's like we were trying. So, we can do that, but we just want them to be on the same time frame as us.
Yeah. Compliance, the big C word here. So. Lots changed in Colorado. I think 2 years ago, Denver started with their rental license. Colorado's passed some things. So talk to us about staying compliant, which is not a fun topic, but very, very, very important.
Yeah. Some of the things you have to talk to a lawyer about, that we can't go into on this webinar, but
we tried. I'll just say we tried.
Yeah, we did.
We tried to include more in this, and our attorney had a lot of heartburn, so we had to back off a little bit what we can include in the
and he didn't want to join us today.
Yeah.
So but just staying up to date on local and federal laws, that's huge. Fair housing, security deposit return process, eviction laws, habitability standards, all of that. Fair housing, that's basically all of those things. And if you have any questions, there are, landlord associations, groups that you can join. We had a meetup about this, which they didn't have a problem with that, but we did a meetup and talked about it. But then obviously legal experts can help you out, but definitely want to make sure, like, let's say City and County of Denver. I actually talked to a guy last week. He's got a home out by the airport, and he just said, I was, apparently I need this license, and he's with he's with a property manager right now. He's like, and I said, well, it might, if you didn't do it, it might be under their name. And if it is, then you have to go through that whole process again and put it under your name because they don't transfer. So I went ahead and I looked it up for him. I said, good news, it's under your name. So you're set. So that was good. But also talking about that guy, security deposits, we were talking about maintenance. He's like, well, can I just use the tenant security deposit to pay for it?
No.
No.
No. That's
wrong road to go down there.
We used to be able to do that. Well, you could at least get some attorneys to say, I think they all say it's a bad idea.
Yeah. So really, just understanding the laws and being on top of it. One thing that I thought about today when I was looking at this is, we're members of NARPM, the National Association of Residential Property Managers. And if I'm not mistaken, anybody that's self-managing can also join, right?
Absolutely.
And there's every month
They'll
they
take
meet.
Your money.
Yeah. Yeah. You go and have lunch every month, and there's always speaker topics. We did the ACU, the annual commission update. That was good. That's always towards the beginning of the year. But there was a whole class about compliance and the new laws last year, so that was super valuable. Yeah.
So stay compliant and stay on top of laws, especially Colorado. Yeah, the last 2 years, and the legislative session started this year as well. They've got a lot in the pipeline as well. So stay on top of it and get plugged in some groups. So who needs a portfolio health checkup?
Well, I mean, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh, I should probably do that. I haven't looked at this in a while. Some of the things that might stick out is, if you're consistently having high vacancy rates, look at that. Is your pricing too high, or is your property not appealing? Kind of look at it through the eyes of somebody that's looking for a place to live. Essentially, would you live there? That's always a good way to look at it.
My recommendation, this is, I do a lot of the portfolio, financial reviews. My rule of thumb is once a year. Mm-hmm. Hey, check numbers once a year. Especially, hey, get you, just like you go to the doctor. We're supposed to go to the doctor once a year, right, for a physical or health checkup. Same thing.
Oh yeah, let me
once a year, right? That's on my list too. Go out there, but I think once a year is always a good thing to go out there and do a portfolio checkup. And I was guilty of this, especially early on, and then like it hit me one day. I was like, wow, the majority of my net worth are in these rental properties, and I can't carve out 5 hours a year to come in here and actually make sure that this multi-million-dollar asset, these multi-million-dollar assets are running well. Shame on me. That is just stupid. Mm-hmm. So I will be much more forceful. And hey, any of these times you have, but my rule of thumb is once a year.
Yeah. I mean, if you're saying that you're not doing it, that says a lot.
Yeah.
I would expect you to be on top of it. But yeah, exactly. Like if you have one property, it probably takes like a half hour, one time per year. It doesn't take a whole lot of time.
Yeah. But yeah, schedule it and do it.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we're happy to work a lot of times, like nice things like, what we do with like, financial reviews, and then operations, asset management review with Keyrenter, like we often work very synergistically together. So if you guys have any questions, let us know. But once a year would be my rule of thumb on this. Mm-hmm. So I know you guys do a lot with the free audit check you do, and you also provide a couple other services to potential new clients out there and landlords around town, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We have, on our website, you can click a link and request a free rental analysis. That's, for people who are starting the process of potentially, rent versus sell. They'll just click on the link, give us their information. We'll shoot them off a free rental analysis and then follow up with them and give them some other advice, along the way to help them make a decision to see what the best route is. And that's really all it is. It's a lot of just working with them. We don't try to sell, do a hard sell. It's like, if it makes sense, great. If, and if we're a good fit for you, great. But if not, there's plenty of self-managing landlords out there who are successful. So just kind of want to give resources. And then, the portfolio analysis is something that we've started recently.
All right. Well, now we're going to some case studies here. So spent the first half kind of talking about, what the audit is and some common trends. And now I think you guys have 2 or 3 case studies to go through here. Mm-hmm. Of some landlords around town.
Yeah.
So walk us through case study number 1, please.
Sure. So case study number 1, we labeled Colorado portfolio. So this is someone we know. She has a property in Aurora and then new build side-by-side duplex in Pueblo, which is interesting because we don't, operate in Pueblo. So
you're not managing the Pueblo ones?
No. We're managing the Aurora one, but that's it. She's self-managing at this point. At least that's how I look at it. Or that's what I know at this point. So we're going to have another slide that has all this information, but real quick before we move, I just wanted to point one thing out on here where it says market rent on the right side. That's pulled from rentfinder.ai. So that's pulling over, what has rented in the last 3 months within a mile radius. And then, with that, when you're
where are they getting their data from? That's not public data. How do you know what they rent? Random question here. But
some of them, I think, buy data from the property
Yardi or whatever.
Softwares. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, what he said, I don't really know.
No, I'm always curious about the data. Like, I love it, but I'm always curious. Like, that's always one of the issues is like sales or public data.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's hard.
What I lease my property for is not public data.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes they'll give you comps, and then you click on that comp, and it's like that's still on the market. So you have to be a little careful with these rental analysis, but it'll still give you an idea, or it might show that the listing was removed. Well, you don't necessarily know whether it was rented or whether it was just removed. So I actually came across that last week where it was a property that was listed and then all of a sudden it was removed and it shows it, rented for $2,800, but now today it's on the market for sale. So that's not really a good comp, but so that's where the market rents come from, and that's the average. That's why we do, we come at it from different angles. And with us having 1,100 doors, we can go into, our system and plug in, the zip code and be like, do we have anything else that's in
Yeah.
there? And that's real data for us. So that's super helpful.
So using multiple data sources,
Absolutely.
that's the way to go. That makes sense.
Yeah. Zestimate, I put that in there. Brandon was kind of giving me a hard time. I was like, well, so many people when I talk is like, well, Zestimate says this, Estimate says that, right? It's like, yeah, that might be close. Like you can see on the Pueblo A and B, it's $15 difference. So that's good. And, it's, about what, $300, about $200 difference for Aurora A or for the Aurora one. So but sometimes there's discrepancies, and we'll see that on the next or on a few other slides. But yeah, you can move over here. So now this is kind of like our initial take on the audit. So let's just start with Aurora, 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,900 square feet. We've got current rent of, let's just say 3,400, $33.99.75. It was a fire sale. Monthly debt, $32.11, and that's including the PITI, so principal, interest, taxes, insurance, and they have a $250 HOA that's charged quarterly. So divided that by 3 for the $32.11. So they've got a cash flow of 188, and then I thought this was an interesting ratio, just the debt cover or service coverage ratio. I don't think many people really use it, but it does give you a nice quick number of like what percentage of the rent that you collect is covering your debt service. So they're 7% over their debt service, and if you are investing, like an investor or like a lender, I guess wants to see 25% over if they're going to be lending on an investment property. So
you
yeah,
can almost be sure on a property like that they're putting money into this year over year. Like just any amount of vacancy or one-off maintenance costs or whatever will eat up all 7% of that.
Yeah.
So
that's a very high level.
Is this a client or someone new that you guys were looking at?
Client.
This is okay.
Yep.
So this is including like addition. This is not including vacancy and
Right.
reserves.
No, it's more like if you look at that, it's like, okay, if you're maybe going to buy something, you could just be like, okay, we're gonna look at and see, will this cover the mortgage, and then you can dive deeper in it, right? But this is a very high level sort of ratio here.
But you guys killed it with getting the above market rents on that one.
Yeah. So the thing about that is it's out by Buckley Air Force Base, and it's rented to people who work there. So it's actually a government contract. So she was able to get more rent because of that. Where if it was in the public sector, probably wouldn't have, probably
been
be
closer
to 28.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So then we're going to look at utilities, and we're going to look at pet fees. She's getting $50 a month for pet fees. Tenants pay gas and electric, but the owner pays water and sewer. So that's what I was talking about earlier. Might be doing that to ensure that the lawn gets watered in the spring, summer, and fall. And if it makes sense, great. If not, I mean, you could make a little bit more money by charging for the water, or at least not having to pay for the water, right? So that you're lowering your expenses.
Sometimes on that too, if you're worried about that like disincentive to actually water the lawn, you could just do a monthly fee that's tacked on that's like a low estimate of the annual water, and that way you're not adding a premium. There's some of the new laws make it a little tricky to charge. You can't be charging more than the utility, or you have to be a little careful there. But certainly if you want to charge less, you could at least have something there that they add on $50 a month or something like that.
And that's a good thing. Like utilities are not supposed to be a profit center for the landlord. They're supposed to be like
A
one-to-one
pass-through,
covering out pass-through and covering costs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of people do that. You see, like especially single-family homes, the front yard and backyard with grass. They'll charge $50 a month for water, even their water bill is $100, $120 a month. Hey, they get some. Tenant understands they have to pay some of it as well, but then it mitigates that they're not watering the lawn risk.
Mm-hmm.
I can add too on this. This is I believe this Aurora property was bought with a VA loan. So yeah, it's one of those. It's not a home run in terms of cash flow, but very little money into it, so it made sense to hold on to it.
Mm-hmm.
That's puts a smile on my face. I like leverage, so
Yeah.
great job on this landlord.
Yeah. So I mean, she's doing well with this property. It's working out for her. And then they were able to move down to Pueblo. I think they lived in Pueblo Unit B, which when they purchased that, there was a new build, so they were able to put in, some higher end finishes, not builder grade. And that's one of the reasons why they're able to get a little bit more rent than the Unit A, but also they rented it in, peak season. So, June, July, August, that time frame.
So I think they lived there for a year or something.
Yeah,
like
they did.
that.
They lived there for a year and then rented it out.
Filled that side as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so everything's pretty much the same. It's a mirrored unit. Cash flow on unit A is a little less than unit B because unit A got rented in the fall. So, just some changes there that we could see based on seasonality. The debt service coverage 107, the other one is 1.21. So average that out, it's, the three of them, it's about, 10% over what their debt service is per month. So not too bad, but I would say put all that into an account and hold on to it. Don't go spend it. But yeah, overall, it seemed that they were doing pretty well. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's a ton that they could look into. There's no pets in the others, so no pet fees associated with that.
And I see a note here at the bottom, if they were re-rented now, since the market has declined, some rents would be probably a little bit less or softer now.
Yeah, I would, if we were managing those, we would say, market's changed. You might not get what we were getting before. So just setting them up for, reality, essentially.
All right, case study number 2 here.
Okay,
we got, 2 Denver metro properties.
Yeah. So this one, we got one in Denver and one in Arvada. So they have the Denver rental license. Let's see, on this slide, what I wanted to point out was the discrepancy. If you look at current rent for the Arvada property, $3,150, but you look at the market rent and the Zestimate, $2,200 and $1,829.
Oh, what's going on there?
Huge difference. Yeah. So that's really all I wanted to highlight here. So we can move to the next slide where we go into more detail. So for that, we'll start with Quitman first, and then we'll finish with the Arvada one. So Quitman, 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,200 square feet, current rent $2,900. Their monthly debt service is $1,800. So cash flow is $1,100 a month. That's great. They're killing it on that one. And one thing that they do that's interesting, we don't see this often. Really not at all. But they have this set up with their tenants where the tenants are responsible for the first $50 of expenses per month to avoid minor nitpicky work orders like, oh, my light bulb went out or something like that. So when the tenants put in work orders, they're the idea is that they're legit. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that? I mean,
this is not new to me. I've heard people talking about this for many years, and some people have had success with it.
I'd be curious, I don't know, does that help things, or do people avoid reporting issues so they don't have to pay the $50?
To save $50.
I'm I won't mention that water leak in there because I don't want to do it, and then there's that slow drip, and then
probably
3
really
months later
depends
it's
on
mold.
the tenant base, right? If you're trying to do this in some C class stuff, I think that you have a lot of that, but these are pretty A class type tenants.
Yeah.
So
and I think how you communicate it, and this is per month, not per work order. So if it was per work order, I think you'd see that a lot more. I mean, with this home, the tenants have been in there for a couple of years. The rent is below the Zestimate, but was originally listed at $3,200 in 2023, so they had to come down to $2,900. But they're in a good position. So I mean, I think maybe they were a little. I don't want to say greedy, but to list it at $3,200 when they've got that much equity or that much room to move, coming in below $3,000 was probably a better idea. But then let's move on to the Arvada place, 2-bedroom, 1-bath, 937 square feet. So $3,100 a month is crazy for rent. But their mortgage is $3,100, so they're not cash flowing really anything at all.
I can add one piece of context on this. I don't know if you talked about this, but it has a 5-car garage or something like that.
Yeah, it's got a garage, and then it's got a section of the garage that's heated, and it's
so
really nice.
Kind of one of those just unique properties where you can maybe sometimes find that one tenant who really needs that, is willing to pay a premium.
Yep.
So is that how they're achieving the premium rent? Is the garage? It's a workshop person or
that, and they totally remodeled it with a brand new kitchen and stuff.
Oh, it's the place is beautiful. He sent me photos. He's like, this is why we're getting that. I was like, that makes sense. I mean, it doesn't look like a rental. It looks like either somebody lived there or it was an Airbnb. It's high-end finishes. Yeah, everything's top notch.
Hats off to them for achieving those rents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's really close to Old Town Arvada, so good location for sure. So all in, I mean, they're looking pretty good. I would say, the tenants have a dog, but the owner waived the monthly pet fee and deposit. So I would say if there's anything, charge a pet fee and a pet deposit. just because, pets can have wear and tear. So,
Oh, absolutely, they do.
so at least you're covering yourself by doing that.
Yeah. So they could optimize by charging the pet fees.
Absolutely.
What about this third case study, this Fourplex in Lakewood?
Yeah. So this is another one where the only thing I really want to touch on this is, again, the Zestimate. Let's say for Unit 4, you've got market rent from our analysis tool, $1,400, but the Zestimate is $2,180. Like what? Why?
For the same square footage. As
Yeah,
Unit 3?
exactly.
That's bizarre.
Right. Yeah. So I'm not really sure where they're getting those numbers. So
Dude, Zestimates, like their rental estimates are horrible for multifamilies. Like I've noticed that, like they're.
It must be like almost a data problem.
Yeah, I
where
think
it's,
I've seen like they're
translating.
decent for single family. If you do like a duplex, triplex, or fourplex, you get like, and I've always gotten wonky numbers like this because that's like, so these are all the same units, right? Same layout, same size.
Yep.
Okay.
Quadplex, you just walk up the sidewalk. There's, they're mirrored on either side. So one up, one down on both sides. So yeah, we can jump to the next slide. So yeah, like I said, all 2-1s, all 900 square feet. What we're looking at here is the current rent that they're getting. Unit 1, Unit 2, 1,300, 1,350. Unit 3 and 4, 1,580 and 1,470. So based on conversations I've had, Unit 3 and Unit 4 were remodeled. Unit 3 was also rented in peak season. Unit 4 just outside of peak season, but you're seeing that effect that, one, the remodeling has, so good return on investment, to renting in peak season. So what the owner would need to do is decide, okay, well, where am I at? How much was that remodel? What's my return on investment there? Is it worth it to then go into Unit 1 and Unit 2, do the same thing? Or maybe just some minor upgrades and then getting onto that peak season cycle that might also just do, increase the rents enough and have a better return on investment there.
This was a situation where I think they bought this property right at the tail end before rates went up. So got a good rate on it, but yeah, like values softened and rents kind of softened in this class at that time too. So I know it's tighter than they would have liked. They were kind of hoping by now that rents would have bumped some, and so they've also been probably managing like not as much in the way of reserves as they'd like, and so trying to really minimize vacancy, but some of these units maybe need a little updating. And so yeah, there's always more to it than just these numbers, but
that's part of having the conversation, which is great, talking with those owners and learning more about it.
So question here in the chat box regarding comfort with debt service coverage. Is the market still supporting a high appreciation to offset these low ratio numbers? Would seem hard to get a refi, etc. Great question.
you can take that one, Chris.
Yeah, I would not bank on high appreciation over the years. I think the law of averages are kicking in. We had from 2010 or 11, 2022, we had quite a few years of double-digit price appreciation and some years of double-digit rent appreciation. I think historic average for price appreciation is 4, 5, 6% depending on asset class. I think historic rents like 4 to 5%, right? I think around then. And I mean, rents softened this last year. Prices, flat for single family, but really softened for multifamilies and condos, and retracted slightly since the interest rate in there. So no, I would not bank on a high appreciation to cover like a low DSCR. I think that's just not a good play. But this is why doing these portfolio checkups is the way to go, because once you own the property, and I think this is a common mistake a lot of investors make, is, hey, it's all about buying a good property. Well, that's part of the equation, but the real money is made in how do you operate the property. Are you a good operator? Are you a good asset manager? I am decent. I am not great. That's why I like people like you. I like property managers. That's your full-time job. You're better at than I am. So I would not recommend, banking on appreciation to go out there and save a low DSCR, and I think actually puts you at risk. I really optimize on, hey, what can we do out there to increase revenue? Hey, actually make sure you get the market rent, and then implement things like, hey, let's make sure we're charging pet fees. Let's go out there and make sure where we can do a utility bill back situation to go out there and increase revenue. And hey, where can we go in there and decrease expenses? Like we talked about in terms like, hey, what can we do for preventive maintenance? What can we do to go in there and put in LED lights or low flow toilets, or make sure your sprinklers aren't like overwatering, things to go out there and decrease expenses. Because ultimately, like, hey, if you increase your revenue, decrease expenses, the most important thing is your net operating income, right? Like, hey, we always want to increase NOI. And so I would really focus on, if you have the property, what my process is, keep it. Hey, go out there, talk to Keyrenter, talk to John, go out there and say, help me go out there and do this portfolio checkup. How can I go out there? Am I leaving money on the table? Hey, that's step one. If you're not happy with it, step two is look at a conversion strategy. Right now, Brandon, we did a webinar. We did a couple property walks where we've walked 2 medium-term rentals, and you've converted one of your personal rentals to medium-term rental. Like, hey, you can go out there and convert to medium-term rental, and what we're seeing, like a 20 to 50% a month rent premium, something like that. So I mean, like, obviously it ranges, but like, hey,
even some that are more than that on certain. If properties hit just right on that, it can be like almost double the rent price.
Wow. So I would look at that. Secondly, hey, conversion strategy, right? Like, hey, is this the highest and best use? So a lot of times a medium-term rental is, I think, better than short-term rentals right now. If you've got a giant house with 6 or 7 bedrooms, you can look at room-by-room rental strategy. Like, those are 2 good conversion strategies in the market. And then third, if it's just, hey, the numbers don't work, or you're tired of it, or you're sitting on a bunch of equity, might be time to sell. And you have on here, go out there and do a 1031 exchange and trade up into a better performing rental, either here or out of state or wherever makes sense.
I think in the case of all those case studies too, they were all, which is, it doesn't reflect like the typical maybe property or a lot of the properties we have in our portfolio, but those were, other than the Quitman one, they were all bought in the last maybe 3-4 years. And so that's
a tough time.
There's just not a lot of equity, and there's not a lot of rent growth happening, and there's not a lot, there's not a lot of appreciation going on. So even to cash out on those, it's not like there's a huge upside in that. So it is, they all fit the bill well of like, you're just trying to optimize, because it's like, there's not a lot of options that look great right now, but in the meantime, get as much NOI as you can.
And that's one reason why for the Colorado portfolio, they went to Pueblo.
Yeah. To find something that
more bang for your buck down there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So great questions here. I know we have a couple minutes left. So throw in any more questions you guys have. And then I want to wrap up with a couple things, because like, I've had the privilege of being on your Denver landlord podcast, or Digest podcast. I also know you guys send out, I think it's a monthly or bi-weekly, monthly newsletter. It's one of the few actually read on a regular basis. It's a really good newsletter you guys do. But yeah, give them more details on there, and how can people get plugged into it?
Yeah. So if you go to, I think the easiest, just go to our website. There's like a blog tab at the bottom or something. I think just if you're on there for a second, and that's KeyrenterDenver.com. It'll pop up a place to sign up and make sure you're on the list if you're not already. Podcast, you can find that wherever you listen, Denver Landlords Digest. And yeah, our goal here is really to add value to landlords in Denver and help them level up in how they approach kind of financially, operationally, and emotionally.
You play some therapist in there too?
A little, yeah. And trying to help landlords lose a little less sleep over their properties. So,
a couple questions here. Thomas asks, is Keyrenter asking for higher management fees than last year given rising costs? So I'm assuming the percent management fee.
We have not increased our management fee in the last couple of years.
Great, you have not increased it. And you guys have I think a tiered pricing structure, right, for number of units with you?
Yeah, so 9% for one property, 8.5% for 2, 8% for 3 to 4, and 7.5% for 5+.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. I mean, the more scale there's more cost savings all around, right?
Yep.
I'm curious, have you seen I'm asking to the audience out here and you, have you guys seen other property managers increase their management fees?
I can think of a couple.
Yeah.
I would say not a ton, but yeah, you can.
I would say anybody who charges a flat fee versus a percentage. I have seen that they have increased their prices because, as rents go up, percentage based, then revenue goes up as well. Flat fee, not so much.
All right, and as a reminder here, we got this QR code, and we'll also send out an email with this link to the Denver Landlord Digest, and I think a couple articles or podcasts on preventative maintenance. I know, Brandon, you put together a good article, I think, in December on just some of the legislation that's happened as well. I think it's a good thing to include. Yeah. So we'll send an email with a lot of good resources that I'd recommend everyone dig into. I've referenced those a lot, and they're kind of in my swipe file to send out to people, just for my clients. Hey, check this out, do this. So we'll send out those details on there. But again, if you want to go out there and have your portfolio health audit, fill in the QR code. And it all starts with having a quick call with John here. Mm-hmm. Just a quick call to establish a relationship, get some key factors, get some key data. Then he or Sean and his team will go out there and start doing the rental market assessment, going out there and seeing, hey, what can it rent for? Or the comps, obviously taking seasonality as well. Then go out there, if you are in Denver, do you have a rental license? And if you have a rental property in Denver without a rental license, you should go get that, because you're, I think, 2 years past due at this point, maybe 3 with some multifamily.
And they're starting to send out fines now as well.
Are they cracking down now?
That's what they said anyway. I don't know anybody that's actually got a fine.
I don't think I've heard from someone directly who got
Yeah. And I've heard too, I remember when it first came out, there was a big, reaction to, oh my gosh, one more thing. I don't have any properties in Denver County, but from the people who've gone through, it's not that big of a deal. Yeah. Pay a few $100, get it done, and
you got to get an inspection and stuff. Mm-hmm. But and we'll see some where the inspection brings back some stuff that they have to upgrade or whatever. It's all safety stuff and that kind of thing. But for the most part, we don't hit a ton of. It's not like they're giving you a punch list that's going to be $10,000 of things to do. So
so it's not been a big pain point.
Right.
No. Good. Utilities review. I think this is a great thing to look at. Also with Keyrenter is, as we've talked about, a lot of landlords do leave revenue off the table on there. And I've seen in my own portfolio as well, it's much better to charge, hey, rent is $2,000 and utilities are $100 on top of that versus $2,100 for everything. I think it's great to break it out, and then people can understand, hey, here's the rent. And then, I do have to pay for some water. I do have to pay for some gas.
Yeah, when someone's just browsing on Zillow or whatever, they're expecting that that's not the all-in price. Mm-hmm. So you want to be showing apples to apples there. And even if it's a situation where, it's a duplex and there's only 1 meter or something like that, you can get creative how to solve that with, averaging it out or doing a bill back or something. But don't just say, because it's not straightforward and they can't put it in their name, we're going to include it in the rent.
Question here. How often do you have to renew the Denver rental license?
Every 4 years.
Yep, every 4 years.
Every 4 years. So every 4 years. And, the other thing, part of the portfolio audit is property listing review. Again, I want to make sure that it's optimized for the best eyeballs. And I agree. I think you were talking about earlier, Brandon, just photos. Mm-hmm. $200, $300 professional photos are so worth it. Because once you have them, you can reuse them quite a few times. You'll get a lot better traction interest than, hey, some low quality photos with you taking your iPhone or poor lighting. If you've bought a property recently, you can ask the listing agent and the seller, hey, can I keep some of your listing photos to use? You have to ask permission because that is their intellectual property, but a lot of times they don't care, right?
Sometimes we'll do that and they want to sell them to us for $150 or something. No. So it's sure, whatever.
Still easier and cheaper than doing your own photos, right? And I've actually had a couple landlords where after they've remodeled their property, they've gone in there and they spent a few $100 to stage it. They've taken professional photos, and then hey, they use those photos for 5, 6, 7 years, and they're the ROI on that is just amazing.
Yeah, there's some companies that'll do virtual staging and that kind of thing too, depending on the property. But yes, there's some properties that just really benefit from that. Otherwise, it's just these wide open spaces that look kind of funky without furniture in them and that kind of thing. So.
And you're in the mirror, you see somebody taking a picture, right?
I love those photos.
Oh yeah, that's classic. Or sneaking the camera to the side. But something else, if you're marketing, let's say in the wintertime, when let's say you get a renter, but it's also going to be beneficial to then send out a photographer to get some photos in the summertime when, let's say it's single family and you've got flowers or the lawn, and then use those photos as well, as opposed to just dreary winter dead lawn, that sort of thing.
Cool. All right. Well, we'll wrap up here. John, Brandon, thank you guys for hopping on here. This is a great webinar.
Absolutely.
And then scanning the QR code. And also, we're doing a lot of content this year around optimizing your portfolio, like we talked about today. Also doing a lot out there for the medium-term rental conversion strategy as well, because that's a new thing I think Keyrenter, you guys started a few months ago. We've done 2 property walks so far. Both of those have sold out. I mean, maxed out in terms of the headcount we can take on there. So we've done some numbers on there. We're trying to do a property walk every 4 to 6 weeks as well. So we'll put some information in the email, or if you're really interested in that, let John know and he can take you down that route for what it would look like for medium-term rental. But amazing strategy for the right properties to go out there and get some rent premiums in the current market. So thank you, everyone. If you got any questions, let us know. Otherwise, we'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.